Have you ever lost a job, lost a close family member, got rejected by someone that you had feelings for? In that absolute shotgun blast of, oh shit, situations that I just pulled the trigger on, I surely must have hit and caused some of you listeners to remember the feelings you had at those times in your life. And if I didn't, well, you're lucky. Treasure it. For the rest of us, remember that overwhelming sense of every expectation you had at that moment changing? That's shock. The word really doesn't do it justice, but shock is a state of one's mind when their world, their entire world, changes. We live in a world that consists of expectations. Expectations are what we use to comfort ourselves. No matter how bad times may get, the presence of things we rely on and can predict helps us to maintain ourselves and our baseline happiness. Our expectations are built largely on mere assumption. Assumptions that everything will be the same as they are now, and that change is not expected to occur. Not tomorrow, not today, definitely not tonight. Not when we least expect it. We as humans have the luxury of assuming that we will have our job with that golden income for years to come, that our loved ones will remain nearby and in touch with us, and that that person that we really like will feel the same way back towards us. But, as we all know, shit happens. Supervisors decide to fire us just for not liking us. People grow distant or die just because that's the way of things. And sometimes that person we think likes us back exists more in our head than in the world that we would call real. We suddenly learn the truth in these moments. We live in a world of assumptions. When the loss of those assumptions occurs, you're entering into a new world. It's like stepping out from a warm room into a cold, dark, flat, featureless field. It's a total shock to your emotional state. There's that word again, shock. It's a shock to the sense of normalcy that you had, that equilibrium. You lose your appetite, you lose your interest in entertainment. You just want to kind of sit down and put all your energy just into existing. Because it takes a lot of effort at a certain point when you're that shocked. The shock has a domino effect. Suddenly, doing small things like brushing your teeth become toppling skyscrapers that are hard to surmount. And those skyscrapers fall against what are now mountains. Things like getting your oil changed. And then those mountains hit even bigger pieces. Things like life goals, seeing new places, making families, securing safe and happy retirements for ourselves and our loved ones. Those things become planets and skies. And they're all falling. Till even living can seem impossible. Why bother with any of this if it's just going to happen again? If you can't count on hopes, what can you count on? Everything fell apart. And here in this cold place, you see everything as it can really be. You see that humanity lives in a world of assumptions. And that if we live to only see what's really out there, well, we're not human, but something else. We would see and live in a world of truth. But surely we're still human, and is that any place for a human to live in? Even if human thoughts are fantasy, and the truth is a cold world of rationality, likelihoods, and percentages, what's most likely to happen? The safety in knowing exactly what will happen before it is supposed to happen, and knowing that it is supposed to happen. Even if that was a world, humans couldn't live in that world. And that's the key word here, human. We are human beings. And all of those situations that I just discussed were human situations. They revolved around a human needing things and expecting things and assuming things about other people. We as people are always trying. Even if people aren't who you think they are, even if your supervisor turns out to be a monster, even if that person you liked turns out to not really like you back and not be the person you were fantasizing about, even if your loved ones don't live forever and your assumptions of the world, always including them, aren't true, you still try with people. You make those connections and those relationships. Why? Because that is where humans belong. That is our natural function. That's where we derive our greatest sense of achievement and pleasure. We may not last in the physical world. We may be disappointed while we're here. But our influence in this world, the world of the human, the world where fantasy of the future lives, is us, is who we are, is what being a human is. We only find immortality in the memories of others. We only see the fantasy that we believe remain as truth when we receive it back from other human beings. Maybe you've been there once or twice on the outside, looking in. Maybe you had a shock, and now you're thinking, does any of this matter? Maybe you thought that the world of the human looks awful. But being on the outside without it is worse than being hurt because of it while in it. Have no doubt about that. I've been there, I can tell you. There are much worse alternatives out there beyond the skies. The truth is out there, but we only survive in here. So that feeling of alienation and expulsion from the world of the human is turned into a situation that is expertly explored in probably the strangest film to ever be released at Christmas time. I'm talking about 1978's Invasion of the Body Snatchers. In this sci-fi thriller, we see what happens when normalcy is snatched away from humans. It comes in stages. First, by a person here and there acting strangely. A stark change in their behavior. Next, whole groups of people are meeting in secret, until suddenly it goes from just a few others being different to you being the one who's different from everyone else. And they see it, too. In 1978's Body Snatchers, our main characters, a human health services food inspector and a scientist who works in the same health department, discover that plants, and eventually their deadly fruit, are causing weird changes on planet Earth. It seems that going to sleep with these plants nearby exposes you to a sinister podcast, if you will, that allows the alien flowers to absorb your life force and create a clone. A clone that looks just like you, but with none of the personality you have, none of the emotions, none of the quirks that make a human, which is infinitely more than anything like noses or eye colors ever can decide. The madman screaming in the streets are right. The end is here. There's a new Green Deal coming to Earth, and it's replacing every human alive. As the invasion ramps up and more people are replaced, our characters reach out to each other, to friends, to people who are trusted experts in their fields, and even the government for assistance. And they find about as much help as you would looking for unemployment money in modern times. No one believes them. Or rather, the voices on the phones are just assuring them nothing is wrong. Nothing at all. While they may know differently. Eventually, the movie moves from taking place in the daytime, and it shows mostly scenes that happen at night. It becomes this nightmarish run through an excellently filmed world of darkened streets, a world of murky, abandoned factories and docks lit a sickly green, these electric vestiges of a race that needed light to ward off the dark. Now all that treasured light that we needed to know the world around us only reveals that familiar faces are unrecognizable and have alien stares. Will our rare beasts, these humans, find a way out of the situation, or will they give up? Or will they be run down by the new world as it wages a silent, secret war of human extermination? You know, I have to say, the sheer sense of isolation and terror at wondering what you would do in a situation like this is arguably what going homeless must feel like. One day you're a normal person with a car and a house, and then overnight, almost, you're wandering the streets trying to find food from people that don't understand you and people who might even want to hurt you, or somewhat worse, demand you subvert to their programs, their ways, to survive. Just like the pod people want to change the humans in this movie, most free help in our society comes at a price of conformity. You have to do what we say, or you don't get to eat. Is the pod people's offering a good one? Is it survival in the face of all odds? Is survival itself the only thing we care about? Having your body composted into a garbage truck and your DNA hijacked to create a clone of yourself, does that sound like a good deal? Just like people tell the downtrodden that their help is for the best, to accept their good intentions, the pod people argue with our main characters, telling them that their consciousness will painlessly transfer into the pod person once fully formed, and it's the same person, just tranquil. Is that supposed to comfort anyone? Do you buy that? Is that really the same person now? Or is it an alien pretending to be you? It's one of the mysteries that the movie never really quite answers, and it's chilling. Anyway, what do I think about the movie? Well, I have to say, the pod people are overall a bunch of jerks. I base this on what we see in the movie. It just shows us moments of what the pods is like after they take over. Well, guess what? Pod people put on pants. They go to offices, and they have meetings. They stand around at work performing routine tasks until a certain time of day. I mean, seriously? Are you telling me that after all of that invasion, all that hard work, all that travel across the cosmos, the pod people come to Earth and take over and capitalism wins? Wage slavery wins even if we all turn into pod people? This alien race came here to survive, right? And they just keep on going on with daily affairs, doing the things that are going to make the planet poison? The pod people are still stuck in an office holding in farts and pretending to care about what the other coworkers saw on TV last night. I bet a pod person is still microwaving a stinky leftover fish at lunch, too. Why couldn't you pod people just stay as plants? If this is as much as you wanted, given you have no goals other than survival, you pod people could literally continue your life as you did before as a half-forgotten cactus sitting above a kitchen sink. Your worst experience would be missing a watering every month or so. How does adding elements of human life, like car crashes or social media, to the mix of your existence make things better? But here's how we know the pod people are bullshitters. They're not going to make things better. Pod people are like the ultimate dad that went to get cigarettes 20 years ago. At the start of the movie, it shows the pod people fleeing a ruined planet rather than trying to fix it. Where have I seen that before? Maybe they're more like us than we know. As a species, we both never clean up our messes. Speaking of that opening, watching these strange gossamer octopus ghosts fly into space shows off the movie's brilliant special effects wizardry. It looks as good as any CG scene we'd get today, honestly. I was, however, left wondering, are these the real form of the pod people, or is this just a shape that the last race had that they overtook? But by the way, do pod people eat? I mean, they have mouths, so I assume they eat. If pods mimic all life and all functions of that life, does that mean pods eat other pods that took on life lower on the food chain? Like, is there a cow pod, a pod cow, that someone's going to eat? That's weird. It's another question I had. I assume the transfer is one established pod person takes over one established life form. So who decides what life they take on? Maybe the pod people invasions aren't really all the fun and games that they seem for the pod people. Maybe they're just miserable. And that's kind of sad. What if you drew the short stick and had to come back as like a pod chicken dinner? Oh my god. Even if the pod people don't eat, that means that they have a lot of bathrooms to tear down. I think plumbing is one of the worst costs you can have in remodeling a building, if I remember my reading correctly. So imagine having to destroy bathrooms or repurpose them, because what do they do if you don't use them? They're just there. You got to do something with them. Oh my god, those poor bastards. The rest of Body Snatchers is filled with many occurrences of great special effects. Take the scenes with the alien flowers growing on leaves. There is no CG for this plant physiology that I can tell, just practical effects. I enjoyed trying to figure out how they made it all work, though. The birthing scenes with the aliens popping out of the pod is as engrossing as it is gross. You can't look away as these green beans puke up people. It's ugh. But it's fascinating. And it isn't just the gory effects that are horrifying here. There are also these brilliant, subtle touches that take place in the background. People running in terror in the middle of public spaces while no one really pays them any mind. That could happen today. So the movie's kind of priming you to be out having a normal day, see a person you would call a homeless crazy guy, going la, 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 yelling out in the streets, and you just be like, oh, he's just crazy. But what if he's not? Ooh. Or another scene where a man complains about his wife. One of the most normal and American things you can do, but here we know he's actually got a really good reason to speak up. That is indeed not his wife. It only gets worse as the movie goes on, watching people going to their doom. In one scene, I have to mention a group of school children whine, and it's very subtle, but they whine about having to go to take early naps. You have to be asleep for a pod person to take you over. So you see a school bus letting these kids go into this building, and the kids are like, oh, I don't want to go to sleep early. And it's like, oh my god. That's just, man, not kids. Oh, you never go for the kids, but I guess they gotta go. It's really creepy. Did you also notice that once the copy job is done and you're replaced, your husk of a body, the thing that was you since day one, is stuffed into a garbage truck? This movie is devilish in how it takes something as mundane as the garbage man and turns it into like a mini Holocaust each time it appears in the film. Wow. Also, in a fun scene during all of this world-ending panic, we see a man yell about the pod people arriving. It's a reference to the previous pod people movie, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I figured it was the same actor recreating the end of the first movie, and upon research, I was right. I love seeing that actor appear here. It's a proper touch that most good remakes or reboots remember to do if they're going to be good, and not just pod people, emotionless, soulless remakes. That actor's name, by the way, is Kevin McCarthy, which is kind of an appropriate name for the time it was made in the 1950s, because it's McCarthyism, the witch hunt for communism. It kind of fits in with the pod person thing. So that's cool that his last name's McCarthy. It's neat. Speaking of cool actors, it's also very cool how Donald Sutherland, Jeff Goldblum, and Leonard Nimoy all managed to successfully convey the human horror of being replaced, despite all three already being aliens, which I know for a fact. Great acting. Would you believe that Leonard Nimoy was chosen for this role in efforts to get him to stop being typecast as Spock? So, they wanted to get him away from being typecasted as an alien that looks human by putting him in a movie where he is an alien that looks like a human. Okay. Okay, yeah, that worked out well. The real horror of the movie isn't the gross pea pods that puke out slimy, half-formed clones. No, it's in realizing that it represents the loss of expectations, like I mentioned before. Like it or not, we live in a fantasy in our head, built on assumptions of how the world is. Sometimes things change in enough ways, in a short enough time, that it represents a seeming invasion of sorts, a total changing to our worlds. Often in ways that hurt us, often in a way that prevents us from going back to how we were before. Do you join it, this new feeling, this new world? Or do you fight it? I thoroughly enjoyed Body Snatchers. Like wine, it's enhanced if you watch it after one of those shocks I mentioned in the opening. Body Snatchers is tense, endlessly interesting for the situations it presents, expertly crafted with satisfying special effects, and filled with performances worth remembering. Why you're still a human. I give 1978's Invasion of the Body Snatchers 5 creepy Donald Sutherlands appearing out of a closet out of 5. Would you be okay with going to sleep and waking up as a new person in an alien world? Well, at least you wouldn't have a job. Well, wait. God, stupid pod people. Could just not wear clothes and go live at the water park all day. You had to do something like this. Oh my